Well, here we are, episode 3 of Be a Refuge Podcast. And this is exciting. We've got our first interview from one of our Refuge Community members, Marrty Dormish.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here. And I mean, this is episode 3. So we kind of laid a little bit of tracks about this dream for the podcast, and then a little bit of our story, and a piece of something about Be a Refuge that everyone needs to know is nothing is going to be perfectly sequential. And we're just a non-linear community. But when we were thinking about sort of what's next, it just felt so right to have the Refuge Cafe be a piece that people really learned more about, some for the first time if you're not connected to the Refuge and just listening in, or even for the Refuge community. I mean, we're a dispersed community. So there are people within our community who have literally never been to the Refuge Cafe during our open hours. And that's just reality. They're at work during the day and just can't. And so this is always a both and. But Marrty Dormish is the founder, the dreamer, the one who made this happen all these years ago. And so starting in 2013 is when the first iteration of the quote unquote Refuge Cafe started. So tell us what that dream was and how we started, and just help us understand.
Yeah, so it's great to be here with you both, and hello to everyone in the Refuge community and beyond. I would say I would point to a couple different things in terms of the genesis of the cafe. I spent 14 months in Spain before I got involved at the Refuge, and while I was there, I was able to work at something that was kind of like a cafe, and it wasn't really open to the public, but it was open for events. And it was in Barcelona, which is a really artsy and really kind of a trendy town. And it was in an older part of Barcelona. It was really, really cool area. And it had some elements that I really identified with. Like they said that people, when they came to events there, they could pay what they could or take what they needed. So there were, at that place at least, alcohol was served at some events. But it wasn't for profit. It was just for the benefit of the community. So they would show different films and have different parties and things there. And so that stuck with me, being in that environment in this really trendy area and making a really hospitable sort of a place for people to be. And so after I got involved at the Refuge, I think it was just kind of always in the back of my mind. And we bounced around, obviously, which I'm sure you've shared in prior episodes, from different facilities in the area, in the North Metro area, and finally ended up at the Grange, where we were able to kind of begin to do some cafe sorts of things and providing hospitality and welcome to people and having basic need sorts of supplies on hand for people if they needed them. But it wasn't until we were displaced by the floods of 2013 that we actually ended up in a facility that was exclusive to the Refuge, and that we had a lot more discretion on how we could use the space. So I remember that fall kind of pushing for, hey, maybe we could have this sort of space that at that time it was not called the Refuge Cafe, it was called open space, very literal, and just have a space where people can be, that was open to anyone to come to hang out, because we have a lot of people in our community that still and then were homebound or didn't have a lot of really things built into their lives that provided connection with others and community. And so the idea was just to have a place where people could come during the day and hang out, listen to music, color and draw, eat together, talk. And so over time, as we did that, it kind of began to take on a life of its own. But that was really the beginning of open space and what became the Refuge Cafe. So does that answer your question to get things started?
Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah. So as soon as we had our own space, you were like, let's go. You were like biding your time. That's awesome. Yeah, I remember open space, and how many days did you have originally? Just like 2?
I think we started with 1 day a week, and then
10 to
after a while-
2. It was short. It was just
Yeah.
10 to 2, 4 hours practicing, 4 hours every single
Mhm.
Tuesday.
Yeah, because we always say that we like experiments. So anyone listening here, if you have something that you're really passionate about that you want to try out, we're always open to discussing the possibility of pursuing experiments. So that's what it was. That's how it started. 1 day and short portion of the day, and then it expanded over time to 2 days, and then eventually to 3, which is where we're at now, open 3 days a week.
Mhm.
That's awesome. And so how did it turn? I mean, I know it's like slow progression, but how it looked then and kind of the concept then is similar, but it's kind of a different animal now. And so I'd love to hear a little bit of that progression of, was it just because of the demographics that started coming in, a demographic shift, or maybe start with describing how it is now, and then maybe how we got there.
Okay, yeah, I'll start now and then backtrack. So the best way to succinctly describe the Refuge Cafe now, I think, is that it's a day shelter. So we provide lots of things to support people's basic needs. And so we serve free lunch, we offer free showers, we're able to make referrals to local services, offer a place for people to be during the day if they don't have a place where they can spend the day. So we have a lot of people who are on the margins in different ways, economically and otherwise, who end up coming to the cafe to rest or for support or for help with services, to recover IDs that they may have lost. There are all kinds of different situations that people are in. So that's kind of what it is now. The cafe is a day shelter where people can come and help meet some of their basic needs. But the journey of how it transferred from being open space to cafe day shelter, I think, is that there were just a lot of threads that kind of combined together to make it what it is now. So some of those are, we just started making more connections in the local community and regionally, but just with some of the local social service agencies, other nonprofits in the area, as well as the local Department of Human Services and groups like Mental Health Partners and Workforce Center. And the more connections we made with them and the more we were kind of coming into contact with people on the margins, the more the need in our area became apparent for a place where people could come without having to pay anything. And I think that's one of the very specific niches that the Refuge Cafe fills in Broomfield and the wider kind of North Metro area, is that there are very few places where people can go and spend time without being hurried to leave or without having to pay for a cup of coffee or buy groceries or whatever. And local libraries also bear some of the burden of that too, because they are public spaces and they're open during the day. So there are places like libraries where people can do that, but there also is a specific clientele that libraries often kind of cater to, and that tends to be families with kids and people that are more kind of middle class. And it's not always the case, but often the case. And so I think the niche that we fill is that we're open to anybody. Anybody can come and hang out at the cafe and be there and take a nap or interact, have a conversation, or kind of be off on their own to have some alone time and have space of their own. Because we have a lot of space in our main area, as most people know listening to this, and we have couches set up in different areas of the space. It's all kind of open, so you can really see what's going on everywhere. But there are some places where you can be more to yourself.
It makes me think too, Marty. I mean, a piece is like this day shelter, and what is one difference, I think, of like typical shelter is that it's only a certain kind of person that goes to a day shelter. So people who are experiencing homelessness, it's like that's where you go for shelter. And what's different here, I think, is that there is, even though that's a predominant group that comes to the cafe, it's not the only group. So there's this wide, and this started, I think, with open space. It's like you knew you could drop by and you could eat and you could see people and you could hang out, you could get a hug, You could get a little bit of love. You could maybe get food if you needed it, but like you knew people would be there during that time with no like programming. Like it wasn't I had to come at 10 and then there'd be something at 10:15 and then we'd be done at 11. It's like you could just come in. And I feel like that's the piece now that is really apparent, because if you stand in the refuge and at the cafe and you look around, there'll be some suburban moms who their kids dropped off their kids at school and they just came by to say hi. There'll be some seniors who are lonely or might have gotten dropped off from Accessoride to come get some food and pick up a few things. And then a bunch of people who are in cars or on foot who are needing showers and some things. And then there'll be some community partners who are there and meeting people, and then maybe a church that drops off some stuff that we need. And so it's got this shelter, which is kind of the name of the refuge. It's this place that would really be like this exhale. You could just exhale, and you didn't have to do anything. You didn't have to pay anything. You didn't have to show an ID. You didn't have to become part of something like intentionally to belong. You just could pretty much just come and be there in any way. And I love that eclectic, wild mix of scanning the room and going, wow, there's a lot of different people in this room right now. With all different stories and financial resources and everything in between.
Right. Yeah, that's really good. And I think another thing I would add to the short description of the cafe is that it is a low barrier day shelter. And we do everything we can to make sure that barriers are as low as they can possibly be. So a lot of places people will go during the day, they need a place to be, require that they show ID, or require that they live in a certain zip code or are sleeping in a certain zip code, or that they earn a certain amount. So there's a lot of, using agency speak metrics involved in determining whether someone can be in a space. And we want to eliminate those as much as possible. So really the only standard or only guideline that we have at the Refuge Cafe is just asking all of our guests and volunteers and staff to help keep the space safe. So that's really the only standard that we have. And that includes, we're a drug and alcohol free and violence free day shelter. So if people are really struggling or not able to help us maintain those guidelines, those are the only reasons that we would ask them to not be on hand. But we really do everything we can to make a welcoming and hospitable space for people to be. And I think that we've come a long way over time. So I think we really started out as a sort of like an insular group, because it was mostly refuge people who are already connected to the refuge community who came to open space. But I think we've grown to become something that's much wider, because we have connections now, not just in Broomfield where we're physically, geographically located, but far beyond that, even into Boulder and with local municipalities. So we have municipalities like Thornton that are sending people over to the cafe because they don't have places like the cafe for people to hang out. Same with North Glen and Westminster. We got a grant from Westminster, from the Westminster Community Foundation several years ago to help start our shower program. And so there really have been little contributions from all over the place that have helped to enhance the services that we provide and enhance the resources we're able to offer at the cafe. And I think we all have hopes that those things will continue and that will continue to grow and expand, because to be honest, the day shelter that's only open 3 days a week is not completely fulfilling its promise. And so we want to be open more days of the week, and it's just a matter of kind of capacity right now, of being able to have the proper staffing, the right people in the right positions in order to offer that space, more hours and more days during the week. So shout out to anyone out there who's listening in, who may have resources or referrals or suggestions for us to pursue along those lines.
Y'all operate on a shoestring. It's pretty amazing how much gets done with the resources that we have. It's pretty amazing.
Well, and it kind of fits in this weird category. This is what's always weird, and this is true about the refuge always, because we're this strange hybrid organization. We started in faith faith is in our roots. That's how we formed, and that's in us. And we're grateful for that as part of our story. And then we also have some other parts that function like a regular nonprofit, and we do have our 501c3. So we did that process, but it's different because we're not pure in that same way, where certain nonprofits that have one singular thing that they do, and they just do that, and that's what they do. This is a piece of this bigger story. And so it makes it more confusing. And sometimes people go, oh, get this grant or get that grant. And I just want to say, you want to try that? We do. Their grants are hard. Grants are really, really hard. And so they have a lot of things. They measure things that we don't measure. They require things that we kind of, and sometimes are in a violation to our core practices. And so, and that we haven't seen an experience of this, the kind of like what are measures of progress and some of those things. And so it's complicated. It feels complicated.
So what's an example of a metric that feels like a violation to us as the Refuge Cafe for people who aren't in that world?
I would say, as Kathy was talking, the thing that came up for me was we've, for the last 3 years, helped to run Broomfield's emergency sheltering program in winter. And it was really a program that we helped create, and that was born out of a concern for our neighbors who are outside in really severe weather, particularly in cold weather, and a concern that some of our friends who had been coming to the cafe would freeze to death at night because they were sleeping outside or sleeping in a vehicle and were very vulnerable. And so through our partnerships with a number of community organizations, we started working on that and helped to facilitate that for 3 years. And we still have a kind of a supporting role this year with new partners, but there's always a push and pull in this work, especially in regard to emergency sheltering, with how many people are you sheltering? How much does it cost per person? So a lot of grants come down to one number, which is cost per person. Of like, if we give you this grant, how many people are you going to be able to help with this money? And I get that that's how things work. That is the system, but it really is, it points to the fact that our system as a whole, locally and regionally and beyond, operates under a scarcity mentality. It's like there are limited funds, and so we have to be very specific and very detailed about who we can help. And that's why all these restrictions exist about zip codes and how much you earn and what programs you qualify for, and what your ID says and all those sorts of things. But I think part of the blessing and the curse of who we are as a community is that we do not do things that way. We try very hard not to do things that way, because it should always be people first. We talk about that all the time at the cafe, of having a people first approach. And that includes the language that we use. It includes the policies that we do institute. It includes all kinds of different things. And so I think that is one of the major push and pulls that comes from grant applications and metrics and all those sorts of things, is oftentimes it can be reversed, and that the people are lost in the shuffle and the number becomes more important. So it's kind of like when Jesus, for those who care about the Bible or remember Bible verses or stories, Jesus says the Sabbath exists for man, not man for the Sabbath.
Yeah.
Trying to also fight against that same sort of mentality in his day of the program becoming more important than the person type thing. And that is a constant struggle, because the more resources that you want to provide, and the longer that you're open, and the more people you reach out to, the more tempting it is to make compromises in that area.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like what you said about just people over projects and people first. And I noticed that even in your language as you were describing the policies and the guidelines around the cafe. And you probably don't notice it because it's just second nature to both y'all. I've been doing this for so long, but for organizations that are more hierarchical, you said it's just a snippet, but you said, these are our policies and it applies to guests, volunteers, and staff. And that everyone is holding it together, and that mutuality, that's really rare. Like usually there's policies for guests and there's policies for staff, and or people wouldn't even say like the policies for our guests are this. They wouldn't even think about it. But that's something I really value about the cafe and about our community, is there is this just mutuality of like everyone gives, everyone receives. And I'm sure that each week both of you receive something beautiful from different people in the community, whether they're other staff members or guests or volunteers.
Yeah, I love that word mutuality. That's a really fitting word, and that describes very well what we want to accomplish, because we are a unique day shelter, even though that's the best word I use to describe what the Refuge Cafe is or what it's become. It also needs to be qualified, like Kathy was saying, because the Refuge Cafe is unique and we do blur lines. And so it's not a day shelter similar to what you may encounter in Denver or Boulder, where people can go and hang out, because we're really, really trying to foster community. And that's one of our deep core values, is that this isn't just a place where you get to come and ask for resources. This is a community. We want this to feel like a valued home, where you're coming and you're also invested in helping to care for this place and keep it clean and keep it safe and to contribute. We oftentimes our guests are our best volunteers, and they're helping us to do different tasks around the cafe, and they're providing encouragement when we sometimes get discouraged. And like we had one guest in particular who has made it a point to, and not in a weird churchy way, but to pray for us, to pray for our staff, and to provide encouragement to us, because he knows it's stressful work, and he knows that we get beaten down, and he can tell, from being around for a while and just getting to know us. So it's not just us getting to know him to provide a service, it's reciprocal. And I think that's a really important dynamic that we want to be present and that we want to continue to foster at the cafe. And I would say that extends beyond to a part of my vision for the future for the cafe, is that, like Kathy was mentioning, suburban moms will show up, we'll have single moms, we'll have people who are homebound, we'll have retired people. But I think people on the margins even extend to people in power. And that's one thing I've been considering recently, that people who are in positions of leadership in a community oftentimes get siloed or isolated because of their title, and they lose contact with day-to-day contact with people. So I want to help foster, I want the cafe to be a place that can help foster connections between people from all walks of life in our community, and people who have different positions, different, using jargon again for nonprofit stuff, as stakeholders, different stakeholders in our community. Because we've been having a lot of conversations around affordable housing, and even that word affordable is a kind of a charged word now, but housing that people can afford and can keep them in a community that they love and value has been a really big topic. But it's difficult. Most of the conversations that happen around fostering that in our community, there are only representatives of different social service agencies present, or government agencies, not people who are actually directly affected by the policies being discussed about them without them at the table. So I would love to see the cafe begin to help foster deeper connections between local department heads and judges and city council people and people who are making these decisions that affect others on the ground who aren't involved in the conversation.
I love that. It reminds me of a quote from Shane Claiborne that says, and it's more specific to Christians, but I think it applies widely to poverty and margins and stuff. I had come to see that the great tragedy of the church is not that rich Christians don't care about the poor, but that rich Christians don't know the poor. When the worlds of poverty and wealth collide, the resulting powerful fusion can change the world, but that collision rarely happens. I long for the Calcutta slums to meet the Chicago suburbs, for lepers to meet landowners, and for each to see God's image in the other. It's no wonder that the footsteps of Jesus lead from the tax collectors to the lepers. For when the rich meet the poor, we will see poverty come to an end.
Very well said, Shane Claiborne, and read by Joe. Yeah, I think that's very appropriate. And it's a lot of what I've been reflecting on lately, because in typical conversations that happen in agencies, in my experience, or among agency representatives, in my experience, there's a lot of talk of them being clients, or, we call people who come to the cafe guests, but it means clients or people in need, basically. And that meeting of the worlds is vital, I think, if we're going to ever figure out a better way to do all this, because the current system sucks. You can quote me on that. The current system really sucks. It's not designed well. I mean, I think someone who, I can't remember who the philosopher, systems person was who said it, but a system is perfectly designed to achieve the results that it's getting. So this current system is getting the results it's getting because it's poorly designed, and it's not people centered. It's not people focused. It's money focused, and where is the money and where is the money coming from, and keeping agencies and the people who receive services from those agencies beholden to the sources of those funding, whether for good or bad. But ultimately, it's not a system that helps a lot of people, keeps people down, and it's disincentivizing and all kinds of things. I could really get on my soapbox about that, but
second episode.
Yeah, second episode. I've been thinking, actually, I did want to share, it kind of connects to the quote that you just read, Joe, about the whole idea of incarnation and touch. Incarnation is kind of a Christian theological term that gets talked about in reference to the birth of Jesus. And we just had Epiphany, which is a Christian feast that honors the wise men for coming and celebrating the birth of the newborn king, who was the symbol of that incarnation of the divine. And I read a book recently by a continental philosopher named Richard Carney called Touch. And one of the themes of the book is on the importance of touch and recovering touch in our age, which is a digital age. And he draws a distinction between incarnation, which is basically the movement of the image from being an image to being enfleshed, from image to flesh, which is a really important process. But we live in an image that does things in reverse. It's an image of, or an era of excarnation, where flesh is made into image on all of our touch screens and digitally and social media. Not that all those things are all bad, but we're in a crisis of touch where people are lonely, and people oftentimes, and here's a good example of this for our context, is that oftentimes people who are living in their vehicles, who have a chance to get housing, will refuse that housing because the housing doesn't provide for them having pets. And the pets that these people live with in their vehicle are the only things that have been able to keep them sane and to be able to survive living on the streets. And I think that that's a sign that something is wrong if we're not making accommodations for these sorts of things that bring people and bring us into contact with the earth and with other creatures and with each other. And so that's why I want to foster those connections, those collision of worlds that exist in our communities. I think the cafe is a place where that can really happen and be fostered.
I love that. I think you just came up with the title of this episode, From Excarnating to Incarnating.
Yeah.
Like, what is that?
I love it. And it makes me think, just the basic, simple connection of friendship is really not in these conversations, to be honest. They're not in anything related to almost any of these moments. And we know some friends in Denver at Network Coffee House, and some friends in some different places that really are trying to nurture hubs and spaces for just basic friendship. And that touch part of hugs, of welcome, of human juice between two people, that like, I matter and you matter. It's both and it's with and not to and for. And I think that there was the cafe, it as an extension and part of the refuge, really like magnifies and embodies that. But the values that are there are values of the entire refuge. And I think that that is what I love, is that it's not like a separate thing. It's just manifests itself in its unique way. And it's a cornerstone effort. But embedded in all that is this basic human dignity, friendship, relationship, diffusing power, where everybody gives and everybody receives. And we're friends. Like friends. And that's where we learn the most. And I just want to say this because this happened at Spiritual Formation Sunday, which Joe really helps nurture at the refuge. And this is maybe last month, but I remember looking and seeing friends from the cafe who are on foot, no shelter at all, next to executives who make a buttload of money, and talking about peacemaking together. And I thought, okay, this is it. It makes me want to cry when I even say it. Like, this is it. And that we're not like siloed into our individual parts of the refuge. It doesn't mean that people don't have like basic places that we sort of hub out of, but it's like there's all this crossover and to our shared humanity and trying to learn and love and be together and keep growing and, eat some good food at the same time.
Yeah. That face-to-face connection is absolutely vital and essential, I think, to really create the sort of communities that we all want to live in and be a part of. And we'll have a long way to go. But yeah, I think these sorts of places at Spiritual Formation Sunday and the cafe and elsewhere are really helping to make those things more important. They're little pricks of light that are kind of pushing the darkness away. Because there's a lot of darkness. There's a lot of difficult things in our world, and so it's nice to focus a little bit on some of the hopeful things.
Yeah. Well, we wrap our episodes with rapid fire questions. So are you ready?
Okay.
Ready, bud?
Sure.
Okay. First question. What's one word that best describes the refuge for you?
Home.
Hope or home?
Both are good. I said home.
Home. Got it.
Yeah, home away from home.
Yeah, love that.
All right, I keep connecting with the refuge community because.
Ooh. So you'll have to put up with people who don't give rapid fire answers, give rapid fire questions, because I feel kind of compelled to be there. I think it's not it's not usually a bad compulsion. I think it's a place that is allowing me to pursue my vocation of where I feel like I'm called to be, and so yeah, I couldn't really come up with a good answer for that one.
That was good. Okay, the most irritating part of the refuge is. You can only choose one.
Remember, I'm here.
Wow. I would say for me, okay, I just thought of something. It's our trash and recycling situation right now, because especially at the cafe, which is high use, a lot of people coming through, and we have little pictures of what is recycling and what is trash. And they always end up in the opposite places, and that is very irritating to this person, to this Enneagram 1.
That's fair. I appreciate that. That was pretty calm. There could have been a lot of other things you said.
You will often see me at the cafe picking through the recycling and
I've done it.
bottles and or finding the trash in there and putting it in the trash and bottles into the recycling. So, yeah.
Oh,
All right, so last one is being part of the refuge has helped you ...
I would say it's helped me to become a better person. I think being in community is something that's really important and essential to live into my humanity in a better way. And it's hard to do that alone. So having other people in my life that know me and can speak into my life and just having, a lot of people that I come in contact with is really helpful in that way.
thanks, Marty. Love it. Well, we have our final wrap closing question for all three of us, which is, Kathy.
Just I start closing. I'm just leaving to this conversation with a little more or a little less. And I'll start and just say, I'm just leaving with just a little more gratitude for what has been created. And so thank you for the last almost 10 years now. It'll be 10 years this year. So grateful.
I think go ahead.
I was just gonna say I'm leaving with more understanding. It was fun to hear like kind of the arc of it. Even though I was here for all of it, it's fun to hear from your angle.
I would say I'm leaving with more hopefulness because of what you two are doing and taking on this new project of podcasting and communicating our ethos and who we are as a community to our community and beyond. And I think that's a really cool effort. And that gives me hope. I think one of the coolest things about being a part of the refuge is that it's not a one-person show, that it really is a team effort. And I know I couldn't do what I do without the close support and partnership and being alongside of you two and others that are really committed and really great people and people I enjoy being around. So that always helps.
Awesome. Well, here we go. Episode 3 in the bag.
We did it.
Yeah.
Be a refuge. And we
Yeah.
can be a little refuge cafe in other places. I was thinking that as you were talking. It doesn't have to be the location. Like we can bring, this is that be a refuge. Like we can bring that other places too, in place circles that we're in and offer that in our own unique ways. And that's not exclusive to a location.
Well said. Amen. May it be so.